Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The Cuban heavyweight Frank Sanchez has remained unbeaten, advancing to 17-0 following a 7th round stoppage win over Julian Fernandez on the Canelo Smith undercard. So this was a very impressive finish, but it wasn't a very impressive performance from Sanchez. So I'll get into that a little bit because the finish was first rate. Great right hand, and that just buckled Sanchez. See here on screen, this is the punch coming in, and then a moment later, after another right hand as he's sort of going down, Sanchez has Julian Fernandez falling through the ropes, and he was out of it. So really the finish was superb. Highlight reel stoppage. However, 7 rounds against this guy, the world number 185. Yeah, it wasn't much chop because there wasn't, a whole lot to like at times from the performance from Sanchez, especially when you contrast that against the backdrop of the awful commentary from Brian Kenny throughout the whole telecast ahead of the fight, talking about Sanchez knocking on the door of the top 10, and then really sort of laboring through the fight with Julian Fernandez, who, as I mentioned, the world number 185. And don't get me wrong, I like Frank Sanchez, but he's got a lot more to prove before, he's ready to be anointed as a guy who's in the top 10 or approaching the top 10. I mean, it got so bad at times that Kenny was saying that Frank Sanchez was on the same level as Dillian Whyte and Kubrat Pulev and beats them. And this is the thing, I mean, all this rhetoric and hyperbole, and his fellow commentators were not really agreeing with that position. They weren't that impressed with the performance. Joe Calzaghe, who was weighing in on the fight as well with some expert comments, he said he didn't really like what he was seeing, that Frank Sanchez looked like he had run out of ideas. And to an extent, he did look like he'd run out of ideas, but we'll get to it. So he opened up pretty sharp. First couple of rounds, he was looking dangerous, and Frank Sanchez, good right hand, he's got quick hands, quick feet, good footwork, and he was making the most of it, and he was tagging Julian Fernandez with really nice right hands to the body, as well as some really crisp left hooks. But the thing is, Frank Sanchez hasn't come up against a guy like a Fernandez too many times before in the pro ranks, where he can basically get on his bike, and he's a capable mover. We've seen this before from Fernandez against a guy like Arslan Makhmudov, and that's the only reason he was able to last 3 rounds against Makhmudov, because Makhmudov had to track him down, and he looked like a deer in the headlights in the Makhmudov fight, showed a good chin, but he was managing to ride a lot of shots in this one, as it was in this one too. So Sanchez, while he was managing to tag him with an array of shots early on, wasn't landing flush that too often. Fernandez able to ride the shots, absorb sort of the punishment, but there were the odd shot getting through that was clean, and you thought, yeah, Fernandez has got a good chin. But I said that in my preview video ahead of this fight. He does have a good chin. He's going to absorb some punishment. But if Sanchez is truly to display his wares, he needs to go in there and put on a very good show. And unfortunately, we didn't quite get, I think, what many would have expected. I didn't think against the world number 185 that after about round 2, he did look like he was a little bit one-paced, that he had run out of ideas, and I thought that he was starting to blow a bit too heavy too early in the fight. And Fernandez's movement was really giving him some issues. He didn't seem to be able to sort of crack the code. And yeah, I think one of the things too was the looping punches. Fernandez was able to see them from a mile away. It just was becoming a little bit too predictable. And as a result, Fernandez was getting into the fight. From round 3 onwards, he was starting to look a bit more comfortable. So much so, by the 5th round, he was actually, and here's a still shot from that round, he was actually calling Sanchez on, screaming at him, gesturing for him to let his best punches go. And he didn't quite get baited in, but he was throwing jabs in the odd right hand in this sort of, it must have gone on for at least 30, 40 seconds of the final, part of that round. But it did always look like if Sanchez could put it together, land one of his big right hands, that he had the power to hurt Julian Fernandez, who's been knocked out before. And I was starting to think, Jesus, Frank Sanchez's power maybe not cracked up to be, what people have been making out. But certainly in that 7th round, when he finally caught up with Julian Fernandez and he detonated that right hand, it was a beautiful shot. It was, something that just really took his legs out, started to crumple down. A right hand as Fernandez is sort of, almost half sitting on the ropes, and it was all she wrote. He falls through the ropes, and it's all over. So Frank Sanchez in 7 rounds stomps Julian Fernandez. Probably, for his sake, needed to be maybe in 3 or 4 rounds, because I think if you were to compare and contrast against other guys who've stopped Julian Fernandez, Frank Sanchez at times didn't look that great. He was, laboring a bit, seemed to not really know what to do, how to sort of catch up with him, how to actually get this guy out of here. And it's probably sounding a very negative review. And I think just because I do have high hopes for Sanchez and where he can go, what he can do, but it wasn't an impressive performance tonight, that's for sure. And maybe it was the style matchup. Maybe they thought that this guy Fernandez at short notice, he had a month to prepare, was going to be cannon fodder for Frank Sanchez, but it didn't appear to be so. And let's face it, I've got to get back to these comments from Brian Kenny, which were just completely outrageous. So he was obviously commentating for DAZN on this fight. He said in the lead up to the fight a few times that Sanchez is knocking on the top 10. He said in the fight that he was knocking on the top 10. And then after the fight, he said he was ready for the top 10. But the thing is, though, based on what? Frank Sanchez is still in that period where he's having seasoning fights. If you're facing Joey DeVaco 2 fights ago, and then you face a 40-year-old Brian Howard, your last fight out, and Julian Fernandez in this fight, Fernandez being the world number 185, that doesn't give you anything to say that you're anything approaching a top 10 fighter. At this point, I would maybe at best say Frank Sanchez is a top 30 or so fighter. And most of that is based on talent and upside, as opposed to him actually having proved and given some results that you can kind of go, yeah, that's a lock. Is he in the top 20? I wouldn't put him there right now. And based on this performance, sure, he's got some tools. He's got a really good right hand. He's got some good skills. He certainly looked sharp early on, but there's some question marks. He looked like he was running out of gas. Certainly at times he was a bit wild. From after about rounds 3 or 4, he was certainly gulping in the big ones. I know some people joke that he's the oldest looking 28-year-old on the planet. And, here's the from the tail of the tape ahead of the fight. Certainly he does look a bit more seasoned than 28. But this whole thing from Brian Kenny was crazy. He was wedded to the idea that Frank Sanchez was this knocking on the door, approaching a top 10, and he can beat a Dillian White and a Kubrat Pulev, mix it up with those guys right now. That's too much too soon. And the fact is right now, he's low reward and medium risk. He needs to actually get into some bigger and better fights and prove himself. Just because you beat a 40-year-old Brian Howard, a Julian Fernandez, and a Joey DeVaco does not make you anything approaching a top 10 fighter. And I like Frank Sanchez. He is, if you saw my heavyweight prospects, top prospects for 2020, I think he was my number 7. But let's just pump the brakes a bit. And I think based on this performance, there's going to be a few people going, well, actually, while it was an impressive finish and he got the guy out of there in impressive fashion, the actual moments and rounds before that, he was anything but impressive at times. And he did look like he was struggling to crack the code on a guy who has been taken out pretty early in fights before. Julian Fernandez is game. He's got a chin. And I said all this in the pre-fight. But Frank Sanchez made hard work of it at times. But what did you make of this fight? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.